Hey everybody, PowerStars here with a new series called Why It Failed. Basically, I'll be taking a look at a console, game, add-on, whatever, that was critically or commercially unsuccessful, and see what caused it to end up that way. For our first episode, I'll be taking a look at one of the more infamous failures in gaming, Nintendo's Virtual Boy. Let's start off with a little history. Okay, so in 1994, Nintendo had three R&D, or research and development teams. At this time, R&D3 was developing the console that would become the Nintendo 64, so the other two teams were free to experiment and basically do whatever they wanted. So, Gunpei Yokoi, the general manager of R&D1 and the creator of the Game & Watch and Game Boy consoles, started designing a new sort of console, sort of handheld, called the Virtual Boy. Basically, how the Virtual Boy worked is that it had two screens with different angles of each game that were designed to be viewed simultaneously, creating an effect similar to that of 3D glasses. Yokoi thought it would be difficult for competitors to make a knockoff, and it would further Nintendo's reputation of being ahead of the curve when it came to innovation. After developing the console with red LEDs, because they were the cheapest, and developing in full color would have been too expensive, the console released in Japan and the US in 1995. It was discontinued 7 months later in the US and only 5 months later in Japan. So, why did it fail? Let's start with the concept. Okay, so as weird as it may sound, I personally feel as though the concept checks out alright. Don't get me wrong, it's incredibly gimmicky, but I feel as though if it were executed well, there'd be potential for some interesting games here and there. Something like the 3DS, except since the games were still technically 2D, the 3D aspect could actually enhance more games. Although, unlike the 3DS, they seem to be dead set on this gimmick to the point where there is no way to turn the 3D off. It also didn't function particularly well as a handheld, considering that being fully immersed kinda requires your peripheral vision to be cut off, so good luck playing this one in public. The external controllers also don't help that. So, admittedly, it's a flawed concept, but there's still some potential there. Now let's see if the execution did it justice. Who am I kidding? Everybody already knows how badly the thing was executed. Okay, so first of all, the decision to use red LEDs looks like a reasonable cost-cutting measure on paper, but when people actually played the darn thing, it caused an eye strain in combination with a poorly done 3D gimmick. Bill Frischling, a writer for the Washington Post, reported experiencing, and I quote, dizziness, nausea, and headaches. In addition to that, people who tried the console at a 1994 game show before release complained that the Mario demo shown off at said event was not realistic or immersive enough. So any sense of virtual reality the player could have still retained after nearly going blind was lost by lack of any features that really took advantage of the 3D gimmick. So basically the concept was flawed and the execution only made it worse. But was there any competition? Surprisingly enough, kinda. In 1993, roughly 2 years before the release of the Virtual Boy, Sega had planned to bring a similar headset, called the Sega VR, to the Genesis, but it only ever made it to arcades. Sega reported that the console version was cancelled for being too realistic, but this is probably bullcrap considering the weak processing power. The real reason was probably because of playtesters experiencing nausea and headaches, similar to the Virtual Boy. And that wasn't the only console similar to the Virtual Boy that was developed around that time. Same year the Virtual Boy came out, Tiger Electronics tried their hand at a clone known as the R-Zone. It didn't really have the 3D gimmick, but it did have a similar looking headset as well as a red and black aesthetic. I honestly don't know what they were thinking, trying to capitalize on the theoretical success of Nintendo's biggest flop, but who knows. Maybe they were worried that other companies were going to begin trying virtual reality as well. Yeah, like that had ever happened. Oh. Oh. Ah. Ah, no. Ah. Ah! Ahem. Anyways, let's see how this thing was promoted. Nintendo put their emphasis upon, you guessed it, the 3D gimmick. They advertised it as a technological advancement, using cavemen in the ads along with the slogan, a 3D game for a 3D world. Some ads also used psychedelic imagery. They also had a joint deal with NBC and Blockbuster. Basically, Nintendo was worried about how to advertise the console on TV, because there was no convincing way to display the 3D. So, Nintendo allowed people to rent the console for $10 at Best Buy, and they had NBC advertise this, encouraging people to go pick it up. People who rented the Virtual Boy could later get $10 off the actual purchase. The problem with this strategy is that people who rented it saw how poorly executed the 3D was, and so basically nobody bought it for real. Well, not nobody, obviously. Almost 800,000 unlucky people got stuck with them. And finally, let's take a look at the price tag. $180? That might not seem like much now, but if we adjust for inflation, nearly $280. To compare, the 3DS launched for around $250, and the Game Boy's launch price, if adjusted for inflation, would only be around $170. So in addition to a flawed concept, worse execution, and a weak promotional campaign, it was expensive. So, now we know why the Virtual Boy failed. Anyways, I'm PowerStars, and this has been Why It Failed. Please let me know if you like this series, and if you have any ideas for future episodes, let me hear them. Thanks, and peace, YouTube.
You're on the prowl, wondering whether she left already or not. Leather jacket, collar pop like antenna, never knowing when